Thank you, Sam, for being here, and thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm Bonnie McEwen with the Northwest District Office, and I have colleagues here with me. You've just seen Sam, who is our Continuing Education Coordinator, Becky Heil from the Southeast District, and Jay Peterson from the North Central District. All of us at the State Library welcome you and thank you for being here. And when I last checked inside Iowa Learn's catalog, there were 71 registrations. So I think that's just a really swell number. And as Sam said, do let us know if you're having a watch party at your library and several people gathered together there as a group watching. Let us know that if you would. Do these slides look okay? Sam, are you seeing what you ought to be seeing?
Looks good.
Yay.
Yeah, they do.
All right. Then we're ready to roll, and here's where we're headed tonight in this episode of the Boardroom. You know, for the past couple of years, some of the Boardroom episodes, not all, but several of them have borrowed material from another series that I'm involved in called the Big Ideas Book Discussion Series. And so to get a little bit more mileage out of those programs, I've taken to sharing some of the books that we discuss in the Big Ideas series and kind of flipping the content just enough so that we can have some good discussion about those books, the concepts in the books, and how it applies to the business of boards. Now, there's been absolutely no expectation that you would have read this book ahead of tonight, but I wonder, and I might ask you at the end of our togetherness this evening, if you might be inspired to read this book. The book we're going to talk about tonight is Crucial Conversations. So here's where we're headed with background and info, introductions. We'll look at the characteristics, what causes a conversation to rise to the level of crucial. I'll share some of the main concepts and takeaways from the book, from my reading of it. And with your participation, I know we'll have some good library examples to share. So here we go. With Crucial Conversations, you know, if you're familiar with this book, there's probably a good reason for that. You've either read it or you've certainly heard about it, because this has been a galloping bestseller for decades now. I was surprised when I first picked up. This is the third edition we've been talking about, and the third edition came out in the fall of last year. But I was surprised that the very first edition came out in 2002. It has been revised twice since then, and it has also led to a companion title called Crucial Accountability. If you like the sound of that, maybe that could make its way into our lineup in Big Ideas and in the Boardroom at some point in the future. More than 300 of the Fortune 500 companies and nearly half of the Forbes Global 2000 companies have hired these authors to teach conversation skills through workshops and training. Their customers have ranged from Boeing Airlines to Papa John's to Toyota to the Mayo Clinic. So there is plenty of information here to talk about, and there certainly is plenty of follow-up reading you can do and follow-up resources. And I'll show some of those to you at toward the end of the program. So my idea to take up this book at this point in the year is somewhat because of the uptick in book challenges in school libraries and in public libraries in Iowa and across the country. Actually, there was really quite an uptick this past fall. So for that reason, you know, it's important to have a well thought out response to people who take issue with books in the library, and those are usually always crucial conversations, right? But there are other things that you may be dealing with on your board. Maybe a job evaluation that's gone south. Maybe you have found yourself in this issue of dealing with disciplinary actions. Maybe you've reached an impasse in working with a less than friendly friends group. Maybe it's relationship challenges amongst yourself, amongst your city partners. There's all sorts of reasons that you might need to enter into a crucial conversation. So this book has proven to be a good one to discuss, and I think a timely one. And as I was reading this book, I did enjoy it. And one reason is because it's just loaded with really good examples. And one reason is because it's very relatable. I like that when I choose these books that are kind of sight unseen and I haven't read them ahead of these programs. Well, I have, but I haven't read them before I decide to use them in these programs. But I thought this was relatable because the authors include so many examples from the personal side of life, conversations between spouses, between parents and kids, as well as examples from the business side of life. I know when we talked about this in our Big Ideas discussion a couple of weeks ago, there were so many people who chimed in to say what they related to in this book was how often they find themselves having backed away from a conversation and then later saying, darn it, if only I had said this, or if only I had remembered to say that, right? We probably all have those experiences when we know conversations could have gone better if we had used some of these strategies. So we're going to get there, but this slide shows you the main premise of the book and what causes a conversation to rise to the level of a crucial one. If these three characteristics are in play, you probably have a crucial conversation on your hands. It's when, regardless of the opinion, regardless of the topic, the opinions about that topic might vary. You might have really quite opposed viewpoints on a certain subject. When the stakes are high and when emotions run strong, any or all of those can cause a conversation to be seen as crucial. There's a good quote from the book that says, strong emotions do not prepare us for effective conversations. So there's the premise, and this is how the book is laid out, basically in three parts. What to do before you open your mouth, how to open your mouth, and then kind of wrapping it all up and how to finish a conversation and hopefully bring some kind of conflict or problem to a resolution. That whole section on how or what to do before you open your mouth, I really appreciated that because so much of that talks about prepping, just prepping, thinking through the problem first, maybe jotting down talking points, maybe giving yourself some notes or refreshing your memory about a timeline of when things happened, right? Which is all really what the authors talk about when they say scripting, kind of writing it down, giving yourself some prep time. Which I also think helps to take care of that third triangle there. When emotions run strong, the more prepping we can do before one of these crucial conversations, the more likely it is that we can calm our unsteady nerves. And then you see in the second section of the book, he talks a lot about listening skills. And the authors write that crucial conversations should not be monologues, they should be dialogues. And we have to improve upon not just our communicating our issue with someone, but listening to their side, listening to the other side. Just good reminders all around. So this is the backdrop between these three characteristics of the conversation and these three parts that the authors lead us toward having better conversational outcomes. If some of you read the book, other takeaways that you wanted to pop in and mention? All right. Well, here is a list of possible topics, subjects that you may have dealt with during your time on the library board. And this certainly isn't a complete list. You probably could double this list from your own experiences. But when I was reading the book, as is necessary to do when all of these books we read in Big Ideas book discussions and share with you in the boardroom, all of these nonfiction books are well outside of library management. So it's kind of a requirement that we look for those applications of the concepts from the book and apply those ideas to our business in libraries. So I thought about what topics in our work life or what topics might you be dealing with on the library board. Maybe it was a more difficult than usual director job evaluation. There you can see some disciplinary issues, grievance procedures, budget cuts seems to be sadly common. Maybe you're working through pay equity issues. Trustee absenteeism, if any of you have any experience in that, hold that thought because I'd like to hear your thoughts about that. And then, as I said at the beginning of the hour, book challenges are typically always a crucial conversation. So keep these in mind because what I want to do is bring forward a Zoom poll to have you answer how many of these you've dealt with. Jay, you tell me that I need to stop my slides first. I think I learned that lesson the other day. Yes?
I think so.
I think so too, but if
I
this
think
is
so.
not,
It worked pretty good this way,
okay.
yeah.
But if this is not correct, and if there's a trick to this, Sam will need to teach me this another day. All right. So what you should see on your screen is a Zoom opinion poll. Crucial conversation topics. This is multiple choice. Those of you who are in a watch party, somebody has to be the designated runner up to the computer, and you can be the person who records your answers. Which of these topics have you dealt with in your time on the board?
I like being the co-host for these because I get to see the answers come in as people click the buttons.
Yes, that's fun.
We have a very low definition of fun. No.
Oh, that's Bonnie.
Well, you're right about that. I could get out more.
This looks about right, what I'd say though. So
I got to scooch down a little bit. I'm not seeing. Okay.
Yeah, I got it if you want me to, whenever.
Yeah, we have 76% of our audience has responded. Should we end the poll?
Okay, I'll end it.
Okay.
And then click share it.
And then share results.
Okay, there we go.
And now you can all see how everybody answered. What's our top vote getter here?
Looks like job evaluation, director job evaluation by a mile.
I think that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's good, really, because there's a standard that calls for you guys to do that, you trustees, to do director evaluations. That's a tier 1 standard. So I'm glad that's a top vote getter.
And I'm glad to see book challenges down at the bottom.
Yes, I agree with that too. 19% have dealt with book challenges.
Then budgets and pay equity are close, and that's been huge in doing our roundtables. And one today.
Oh, yeah, you
Long
talked about
discussion of that. Yes,
today.
yes, yes.
Well, very good.
But we also had a discussion of trustee stuff today. So
hey,
and specifically absence. So we'll have stuff for that too. So okay.
It's been a full, rich day.
Oh boy.
Well,
starting at 5 a.m. from here. Yeah, big day. Not that I'm complaining.
Well, let me bring back the slides.
Okay.
Somebody says in
because-
chat they wanted an all of the above answer. I've dealt with 100% of them, but didn't see a
all
way
of
to
the
answer.
above. Okay. Okay,
Should
tell
have
me
been
what.
able to pick multiple. Yeah, you got your other screen. You might want to. Yeah.
But you know what? Okay, hang on.
An old switcheroo.
I got to do the old switcheroo.
I want to close the poll. Maybe that helped. There we go.
All right. So the old switcheroo. Now you got this. So there's what you voted on. Now here's my question for all of you. So just minutes ago, you answered those topics that your board has dealt with. So knowing that crucial conversations are characterized by varying opinions, high stakes, and strong emotions, as you think back to what you said yes to, what you've dealt with, does anybody want to say a little bit more about the outcome? Could your outcome have been different or better? Now, maybe some of you are very practiced, no doubt, at using these techniques from the book. And maybe your outcome turned out better than expected, which is always great. But if things went south, how could the outcome have been better? So as we continue to talk about these things, let me just say also that you don't need to name names. You can talk in very generic terms about your experience. But does anybody want to say more about the outcome? If you think it could have been better, and how so?
Well, I'll start things off by saying that I don't think any of those things that we've dealt with our board really have come to the level of a crucial conversation. We're pretty much in agreement. We discuss the issue and we're pretty much in agreement on how to deal with it, and we go on. So maybe we're fortunate in that way, but.
Well, I think you may be. That is the hallmark of a really highly functioning director and board team, John. So I'm really glad to hear that. That reduces stress all around, right? and it makes your job a lot easier as a trustee. That's really good to hear. Thank you. Other comments?
Maybe while people are gathering their thoughts, I'll share a little bit.
Yeah.
This is Becky. And what I've observed actually doesn't kind of show up under these three, but what I've observed when I watch some of the board director or board and city conversations that have sort of risen to this level, the biggest reason that the outcomes maybe aren't as good as they could have been have to do with people not being clear. So someone will say something and it's misinterpreted and that doesn't get corrected. So at the end of the conversation, everybody still doesn't really agree because they haven't understood what's going to happen going forward. And so there's no resolution, no real outcome. And we're still sort of mired in it. And possibly part of that is the emotional piece that's going behind that. It's really hard to get the right words out and come to agreement on things. But that's what I've observed as I've watched some of those conversations.
I was thinking too, and this is not in the library context necessarily, but in the context of another board that I serve on where we had to have a crucial conversation with a leader, I felt like one way the outcome, like we might have recognized what the base problem was. We might have had different opinions about what caused that problem. Certainly stakes and emotions are high, but like we couldn't really agree on an action item after the meeting. And I'm not sure how that fits into this crucial conversation, but I think in general, people did a good job of taking strong opinions to the table and hearing each other for the most part, but then like not really being able to say, okay, now that we've said all that, we've all said our piece, we couldn't really agree on the next step to take so that the situation didn't happen again.
Well, I think that probably happens a lot in our work lives, right? And even in our home lives, our personal lives. But I hope you bring that back, Sam, your example, because I have a question coming up that I think maybe will more closely hit the question might more closely hit your example coming up. And you'll know it when you see it. And I got to thinking as you guys were offering your examples, as things come up unexpectedly at meetings, it's hard then to be prepared for something you didn't know was going to be brought up, right? That's not cool to feel blindsided at a meeting. Then that preparation piece that I talked about, that whole first section of the book that's titled before you open your mouth and do that prep work first, that's hard to do in the moment. Other thoughts? What is chat looking like here?
Susan's saying something about how Becky's handled a lot of conversations for our county association with the county supervisors. So,
well, yay.
That's yeah. And that's been a subject at all our sessions is talking to county supervisors,
Yeah, that came up at Northwest Director roundtables too. Yes. All right. Well, here's another concept from the book. The authors write about a fool's choice. And they describe it this way, that when we're often in conversations and they get to be a little dicey and the emotions run high and the stakes run high, right? That the fool's choice leads us to either choose candor and tell the truth, or to choose kindness and keep everything all nice and friendly so that we can keep a friend. Yeah. Of course, the authors go on to write that there is a third choice. The reason they call this a fool's choice is that too often we get trapped in one or the other of these. And because emotions run strong, we don't often think that the third choice is we can do both. We can be candid and still apply kindness to the conversation. We expect candor from our doctors and from our lawyers and business associates, I suppose. And our jobs in library land lead us to be diplomatic. So I think kindness is a natural to people in the library profession. How often we've heard this talked about, that library staff are just so friendly and they're so generous and gracious with their time and with their ideas, with the things that they can share and do for each other. So in a service profession, I think the kindness comes pretty easily, but does candor come as easily? So my question to all of you to think about next is, do you have an example of a positive outcome when you chose candor? Do you have something that springs to mind? Becky, I think, is this your question?
It is. I do have an example, but I thought I'd wait and see if any of our audience would like to share a positive outcome. This will be ever so much easier to talk about than when the conversation went south. Nobody wants to admit to that one.
Well, right. A positive outcome when you chose candor. Becky helped kind of come up with some of our discussion questions tonight, and she liked this question, and I think it's really cool because it gives us that positive outcome for something that might be kind of hard to do. And remember, you guys have microphones. You're welcome to open those up and use your mics or use chat, either one.
Bonnie, I think when Sioux County pointed out nicely to the supervisors that we had we used ebooks and said, okay, if you were to give us like the 6% that we're asking for, really, that's only like 2 ebooks for per library for the whole per month for, so it'd be a total of 24 new ebooks is all you're really giving us per library, and that put it in perspective for them. And I think that kind of helped them think, oh, well, maybe they do need the money and that they're willing to use it in a good way. I don't know.
That's a good example, Brenda. That really put some dollars and cents to to the conversation too, right? And it made it very relatable, understandable. Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I think anytime we can take away the I don't know, the kind of I don't know even the word I'm looking for, this generic or examples and apply really specific examples and real dollars and cents to budget requests, I think it does make a difference.
If I could add a comment in there, when I took our library budget to City Hall during their budget preparation process, obviously they looked at the bottom line, one number, but they also looked at the breakdown that I gave them of what I was looking at wanting the money for. And I had put in a salary increase for everybody at, I think, a 6.9%, because that was the cost of living increase that came out. And they kind of looked at me funny as to why you're going to do that. Granted, they are looking at 0 for the city, maybe 1 or 2%. And I said, it's like this. If they get anything less than that, they're going behind, because cost of living says it's a 6.9% increase. If we wanted to give them a true increase, we would want to do a 7, a 10, a 20% increase to make them better off than what they were this year. And they made kind of comments that, what if we end up cutting your budget? And I said, that's fine. You cut my budget, they're going to get the 6.9% increase, and I'll take the money from someplace else. Because my employees come first. If you're going to give me money, let me spend it the way that I think I need to, which is on salaries for employees. Books for the public might come last, because we've got other services we need to provide. We need people to do that. And they gave me the same dollars that they've given me for the last 3 years, but my employees get a raise.
Good. That's good. That's a great advocacy story too, John. And I think you and boards have to advocate for staff needs and interests right along with library service, because who provides the library service? Like you said, it's your staff people.
And I would love to advocate for a whole lot more, because I'm sitting here with, pick on myself for a minute, sitting here with a master's degree, granted, not in library science, but in business administration. And I have a children's librarian who has a bachelor's degree and experience as a children's librarian, and we're paid less than the city clerk, not the city clerk, but the assistant city clerk. We're paid less than city workers. We're paid less almost than the temporary summer help. And when the starting wage for some of the jobs that are in the area at $15 an hour, and I'm getting paid $13, guess what? We're not paid what we need to be to stay here. Granted, there's other benefits like flexibility, etc., that comes into play.
Sure.
But advocacy. I'm sorry, you got to pay your employees if you want to keep them. And the city should know that, seeing as how we've gone through three police chiefs in 3 years.
Mm.
And we did have a 3-member police force. And up until Monday of last week, we only had one because the rest of them had quit. And now we have a police chief back. So we have a 2-member police force. But they complain they can't keep staff, they can't keep workers. Well, how can they when they can get a 20% raise by going to another community?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. It definitely requires staff having advocates for the library staff, for sure. Thank you for that, John. That's a really positive point. Becky, did you want to share
Sure.
what you
Yeah,
what
mine is kind of
your-
the opposite
your
of that one, but it was still a very
Okay.
positive outcome.
Okay.
So mine goes back to a library board who had a director in place who just wasn't quite doing what needed to be done. She was a lovely woman. Everyone liked her. The community liked her. The board liked her. The city liked her. But the library was falling behind because she wasn't able to keep up with the job. And that board really wrestled with keeping a friend and choosing kindness and being nice to this woman. You know, we know she needs a job and we know everybody likes her, but they also really considered what it was doing to the library long term. And so they did the hard work, told that truth, and did a 6-month improvement plan. They said, here's what we want you to do. These are the things we'd like you to work on. They did everything in exactly the right way and were very honest and very upfront about it. They weren't mean. They were very honest, chose candor, and at the end, finally decided it was time to part ways. The library has thrived and grown since then, and so that was really the positive outcome. It was difficult for them to make that decision to let the person go, because they wanted to be kind. And I have seen that happen so many times.
Yes,
where
me
it's
too.
really hard to let that person go and the whole library goes down, because it's just the wrong person in the job at the time. And we try to be nice, and it doesn't always work for the library. So that was a time when I watched a library board over a long time
Mhm.
really make some hard decisions, tell the truth, and have a good outcome at the end.
And it combined both candor and kindness in the long
Yes.
run.
Yep.
And overall better library service in the long term. Well, those are 2 pretty good examples.
I have from my own personal background, I had a boss early in my career who kind of called me to the rug on a couple of things that she needed to. And at the time, I really felt like I'm never going to talk to her again. I might as well just quit my job. Like, I don't want to deal with this. But she made the hard choice there and told me some things that in hindsight, I really did need to hear. And that for me, it was candor. It was good. And I think in the end of the day, it made me a better librarian, a better employee. But it was hard. I think it was a positive outcome overall. But I know that was definitely a hard part of our relationship. And that was fresh off my grad school days. But
Oh, that example, Sam, is actually touched on in the book. They actually write about in that second section how to open your mouth. I think it's that the second section, but they talk about how to hear difficult feedback.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how to deal with that and find the good in it, find the positive in it. And your other example, Sam, that you gave, you will recognize the example you gave a little bit ago. Here's the question that I think you will recognize that maybe better connects with that story. The authors also write about lag time as a determining factor in the success or failure when resolving a problem. And look at that quote down there from the authors. if you can read it, it's kind of small type, but if you can't read it, it says, you can measure the health of relationships, teams, and organizations by measuring the lag time between when problems are identified and when they are resolved. So maybe that speaks to your board experience that you shared a little bit ago. Have any of you experienced this? Becky kind of referred to this in the story she shared, the lag time in addressing what might be substandard performance from a library director or others on staff. Have others experienced of you experienced lag time? And if so, how can you avoid avoidance?
I'm Susie Card from Pella, and I work with teachers and administrators, and I find it very frustrating and very unfair if a teacher sees something on their evaluation that has never been brought to their attention. So a lot of times I have to have that conversation with administrators that this happened 6 months ago. It should have been addressed 6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of the evaluation. When I read this part of the book, I thought about job evaluations and how those are an annual task, right? That we all are a part of, either as the supervisor evaluating others or being supervised, and receiving a job evaluation. Do you guys remember years ago, there were some really, really popular books out called The 1 Minute Manager? Any of you guys remember those? The 1 Minute Manager series. They were by Ken Blanchard. And his whole deal was address things that happen that need to be corrected, address them really quickly after they happen. Don't let something have happened that you know was goofy or wrong or inappropriate. Don't let time go by. Certainly don't yet let a year go by before, or 6 months, like you said, Susie, before you're able to address it. Don't wait for the annual job evaluation to roll around, in other words.
Yeah, Laura just mentioned that in the chat, that setting a reasonable deadline is important. And then Becky chimed in with saying that, she doesn't just close her eyes and stick her head in the sand, and that, that kind of thing. But like, that doesn't help. And I just had a story from that too, of like, a lot of times, this came up a lot today. I haven't talked to mayors more than I have in this past year. And I had a conversation with the mayor about things going on with a library director, and there was a lot of various things they discussed, but the mayor kind of realized, oh, I probably should have started documenting all this stuff 6 months ago. And it's like, yep, that's probably where you should have started. That's where the conversation's going. So you've answered your own question about where this goes.
Yep. So there you have considerable lag time if 6 months have passed, right? Anything else in chat that? It's easy though. Becky says it's hard to avoid it's hard to avoid avoidance, right? Because we kind of want to just back away from those difficult conversations and choose kindness and keep a pal. Yeah.
You want to be Iowa nice, right? And
Iowa nice.
To say that, don't be Iowa nice.
There you go. Iowa nice. Yeah.
I think too, if we want to bring this specifically to book challenges a little bit, but thinking through, so someone comes and says, hey, I don't like this book, and maybe they've even gone as far as to fill out the form listing their reasons and what possible solutions they think they have. But using tools in your toolbox like your meetings and your meeting agendas to help keep these things moving forward, to say, okay, thanks for bringing this to our attention. Our next board meeting is on June 1, and we will be discussing this there. So, even just trying to keep using tools like meetings or calendars or that sort of thing to move things forward as well.
And so you don't forget that it was brought up, and that somebody on the other end of that question would really like some kind of an answer. Yeah.
And upholding our part of that deal too, when they've brought the form to us.
Yes.
Now it is our turn to act if the form's been filled out right, or the procedure's been followed to this point.
Yes. Which really, Sam, is a great segue to our next section here, because I said at the beginning, hang on, I forgot to move my cell phone. Isn't that the way it goes? That's life. I said it early on this evening that book challenges can often rise to the level of a crucial conversation. So here you see some things that maybe your library has done to prepare yourself. This is that opportunity before a challenge presents itself. You all have opportunity to prepare yourself, your rationale, to have a cogent response to those times when people are upset about something they've found in the library, a book or a movie they think is inappropriate, or it even could be library programming. It's important to have a well thought out response, and then some kind of a process to take that conversation where it needs to go, as Sam said. Make sure it's noted and you can bring it back again at a future board meeting if you can't deal with it right then and there at the time. So these are some ways that your library could prepare for book challenges. Everything from collection policies to making sure your policies include, as an appendix to your policy manual, those intellectual freedom documents. Sam mentioned a request for consideration. It could also involve staff training and board training, which I think is fabulous and probably much needed, and even public programming. So hold that thought. I have one more poll to bring forward for you, because we're going to take those very things and we're going to find out, in what ways has your library prepared for book challenges? This is another multiple choice question, so you can look at this list that was also displayed on the slide, and you can choose, if you will, how your library feels a little bit more prepared ahead of when a challenge might present itself. This topic of being prepared ahead of time, ahead of a book challenge, to me is a great way to help tap down the emotional element, right? When emotions run strong in these kinds of confrontations or conversations, however good or bad it goes, emotions can get the best of you. Emotions, I think, can get the best of the patron who's upset. And so the more prepared you can be, the easier I think it is to calm down those emotions. All right, this time, Jay, we have 84, it's climbing. 84% have answered.
I think we got there. Do we want to?
I think we got there. You want to close it and share the
results? I
results?
don't know why I'm the one who's responsible for that. No, I don't know what happened, but hey, I'm happy to. It's
just
fine.
Because that's your job.
I did not work out this way last time, but that's fine.
That's your job.
So today we got much consensus on collection policy.
That is also awesome, because if that tops the list, that's a really swell thing, because there's a standard that requires you all to have collection policies. So that is awesome. 90% of you have those in spades. What else do we see there?
82 at endorsing intellectual freedom documents. Good. And reconsideration request forms. This is a good thing that 67% is nice and healthy, but everyone should have that. going for you. And staff training or training coming in about the same, but no public programming. And so Becky was asking, what kind of, she loves the idea of public programming. Does anyone say they did that? What time program you did? How did it go over? And is this tying into that community conversation grant that came out? Some of our libraries had that.
It
So,
could
okay,
it could very well be that. Have any of you done those community conversations?
I had a question about what is that? I didn't understand what public programming would be.
Public programming surrounding intellectual freedom was my thought. I maybe could have made that I could have made that question better. Surrounding intellectual freedom, I think by and large that a lot of patrons, citizens, don't often think that that is a library's mission, to be in defense of intellectual freedom. And it could take the form of community conversations. I have a slide coming up about that in just a little bit, but it could also be something like taking part in Banned Books Week every September and setting up a Banned Books Week display, because I'll tell you, there's nothing that gets conversation started about books that have been challenged or banned in the US, quite like Banned Books Week. And I think that is just one example of public programming that kind of raises awareness for people about how important this is for libraries and how important it is to ensure it. Mm-hmm.
Even as a child, I remember seeing that in the library and inspiring me or making me think about, was that something people do? Why would they ban this or that book? You never know who that hits.
What, Banned Books Week, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, I thought I took that off. I'm sorry. Pop back
That's
up
okay.
the polls.
So there you can
You
see
got
at
your-
the top vote getters.
Oh, you wanted that.
Oh, I thought you closed it. I gotta get it out of the way. I gotta get it out of my road here.
I remember growing up as a kid, some of the quote unquote banned books coming out, they challenged me to read them. Why were they banned? What was it that was so bad in the books that they had to be removed? Not that they were ever removed, but some of the books that I remember, like Fahrenheit 451, was one of those books, and I didn't see a major problem with it. So maybe it's just me and my perspective, but when you're talking about intellectual freedom, you want information on all sides of the issue presented, and hopefully you can have discussions as needed as to why this applies or why it doesn't apply. I was talking with one mother recently about books that I like to read because her daughter wasn't getting into any kind of reading, didn't want to do it. And she was a teenager, and I'm sitting here saying, here's some books that I have found interesting. And one of them that I suggested was dealing with a cult, and the main character was trying to find out about the cult to, my words, kill the cult. But mother said that wouldn't work because my daughter is struggling to understand Jesus, and anything that raises questions outside of that, she would not comprehend.
Mm.
So I'm thinking, okay, that's not a book for her, but it may still be a book in the library that's worth reading because it points out manipulation that takes place in cults, and maybe you need to look at things a little differently to avoid them. But it's a matter of perspective, matter of viewpoint.
Oh, it is.
And I think it's important to look at all sides when you're going at it. Comment, sorry.
Well, no, that's it. I mean, it sometimes is a hard thing for people to grasp when they disagree with the subject matter. But it can be a very challenging thing to defend intellectual freedom, especially in the heat of the moment when those emotions run high, right? I have a few slides.
Go.
Okay. Sorry about that. This is like, this is a really, really old reference that will date me considerably, but this is like spinning plates on the Ed Sullivan Show. Some of you will get that reference. Most of you will not. I've included some resources for you that should be very helpful to you in your pursuit of learning more about intellectual freedom. And they come to you from a variety of sources. The Iowa Library Association website, as you can see here, has an entire committee of folks devoted to helping support you and your library. Should you receive some challenges to materials at your library, you're welcome to contact the folks you see there listed on the left for support or guidance in dealing with challenges. And on the right there, you'll see resources like the Iowa Intellectual Freedom Guide and a link to a recorded webinar co-sponsored by the Iowa Library Association and the State Library just this January. So we've been doing webinars on this, and do circle back to those webinars if you didn't watch them in real time. You can catch the recordings. And here are some more good resources to note. And I think these are especially helpful if you're new to the library board. Some of you maybe have had a good deal of experience with this, and you've read through these materials, and you feel like you're really quite steady in understanding the need to defend intellectual freedom. But if you're new to the board, I'm going to offer this as a observation, and you can certainly push back and tell me if this is totally not true, but I kind of think it I kind of think it is. I wager that most people who say yes to being on the library board have not had much, if any, prior experience in this topic, in defending intellectual freedom. Do you think that's fair to say? Maybe if you came at library board service from being in a school setting, then maybe you did. But I think by and large, I think that most people who join a library board have not had much initiation or exposure to this topic. So becoming acquainted with these books and these websites, I think, will give you some really good grounding. I think it will provide some valuable insight surrounding intellectual freedom and why we look to library boards to advocate for that. I love this quote from a former Librarian of Congress, and I wished I would have looked up who said this, but it's actually a quote that I've memorized. It's just that I can't remember which Librarian of Congress said it, but it is this: public libraries provide a full range of thought and opinion so that citizens in a democracy can, first of all, be informed citizens. So that's what John was speaking to, I believe, and he's so right in how our collections need to be balanced. Here's a screenshot that will take you to the State Library's Continuing Education YouTube channel. I mentioned this webinar that the State Library sponsored in partnership with the Iowa Library Association in January. The recording is on our YouTube channel. If you want to watch it for credit, though, it's best to tap into your Iowa Learns account and grab it that way. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and we have some minutes remaining. We're scheduled to go to 7:30, but I do have, let's see, I have one more thing from the book, one more takeaway from the book, and two more questions for you. So here we go. For me, this was another really important takeaway from the book, and this is the author's insistence that our conversational outcomes can be best if the people involved in the conversation approach each other with a mutual purpose in mutual respect. So there you can see the quotes from the author's mutual purpose is working toward a common outcome in the conversation, finding common goals, interests, values. Find a shared goal, and you have both a good reason and a healthy climate for talking. And the second quote there speaks to respect. Respect is like air. As long as it's present, nobody thinks about it. But if you take it away, that's all people think about. The instant that people perceive disrespect, the interaction is no longer about mutual purpose. It becomes defensive. So mutual purpose with a mutual respect. Here is what I would like you all to consider next. And circle back to some of these things, these topics that you've dealt with on the board, the polls that you answered, in thinking about any relationship conflicts, any director evaluations that soured. Trustee absenteeism. I would love it if any of you who have experienced that and how you dealt with it, if would chime in on that. And book challenges. If you look at these or other things that you've dealt with, what would be in your script to ensure that mutual purpose and mutual respect? How can you get there?
Trustee absentism. We operated about 2 years with 6 or 7 trustees out of our required 9 because of people resigning, people not attending. How do you deal with? We finally got a few members that have stepped up and said, yes, we will be active, and therefore they are active. And that's a big plus. One of the trustees that initially we got to come on ended up saying that she had to resign after about 3 months, maybe 4, because of going back to school and her job. And as I told her, your future is worth more than your ability on the board. Go for it. Yes. Problem was, it was 2 years later before we could find a replacement for her.
Oh, right. Talk about a lag time. There's a lag time for you.
And right now we have 8 members on our board instead of 9, but at least we can get the 5 required for a quorum a whole lot better than we could the 5 when we only had 6 members on the board.
Right.
We went about 4 months without a meeting because we didn't have a quorum that could meet.
Right.
The pits.
It does make life difficult. It does indeed, John. And I think that addressing trustee absenteeism, I think you definitely need to apply candor, right? You needs to be straight up honest about the difficulties that it poses for those who are able to attend, the difficulty in ensuring a quorum from time to time. I think it does require candor, but here's how I think that conversation can involve kindness. And that is, I think it ought to start out as a one-on-one conversation. And I don't know if this is how it played out for you, John and Leon, but it's funny that with this topic, the reason I wanted to hear from some of you is because this is so coincidental. I've had 3 libraries contact me in about the last month and a half asking for advice and just to talk through, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with trustee absenteeism? 3 in a month and a half seemed like a lot to me. And so my advice is, it has to start out as a one-on-one conversation, because I don't think it's cool to bring that up at a full board meeting in front of everybody. I think that's where emotions would become higher, right? And I think it would become defensive. We just saw that quote just a little bit ago that said, when you lose respect, you also lose that common purpose. And then the conversation is not about common purpose and common resolution, but it becomes defensive. So that would be my suggestion. If any of you have anything to add to that, or any other tips for how you approached trustee absenteeism, or any of these things on the slide.
Bonnie?
Yes.
This is Steve Emming from Davenport.
Hi, Steve.
Our board is very active, and we don't have too much of a problem with absenteeism. I would also say that the pandemic helped that a lot when we got into more virtual meetings, because we meet over the lunch hour, and from time to time people really couldn't take the time to get away. They could give up their lunch hour, but the transit time back and forth before and after was an issue. So that, gave us, that helped a lot. But going back several years, we did have one instance where we had a trustee who was absent a lot. And our bylaws include a statement that's included in our city ordinance, which says that if a trustee misses 6 consecutive meetings, the secretary shall notify the mayor that the position is vacant. And so we got to that point. It was a long time, because this person was not, continually absent. And I would also say that this trustee was a small business owner. The business was really thriving. And then more recently had a new baby. And so, yeah. And so anyway, finally got to the point where 6 meetings were missed. And to go back to the beginning, when you were talking about doing your scripting, what to do before you open your mouth. I spent a lot of time kind of playing different scenarios about how this would go, probably too much time. And so that leads to inaction. But finally spoke with this trustee and, recognized the fact that, I knew they had a lot going on. And it was this person was a good contributor when they were there. And so hated to lose that, but it wasn't a quorum issue, but still we had this, city ordinance that said, if you miss 6, you're done. Mm-hmm. And so, I spoke with this trustee and, told him I recognized that they had a lot going on in their life and really appreciated what they offered when they were there, but, that they needed to be there. And this trustee said, well, boy, I really like being on the board, and boy, I'll do better, and I'll be there. But I just had to say, I understand that and I appreciate it. You have a lot going on. Can you be there? And there was a long silence, and he said, I really don't think I'm going to be able to, maintain my participation and, and resign. So, that was good. And, I guess I saw it as good because I was expecting, it was a difficult conversation. So.
Oh, of course it was, but a crucial one, right?
Yes.
But that's a great story. I appreciate that, Steve, because you really worked it through to the outcome that you and the rest of the library board needed to get to that place. Mm-hmm. And no wonder it was tough when he started to push back and say, I can do this. I will recommit myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too, as you mentioned about mentioning things at board meeting, and this was in a private conversation.
Yes.
But I was a supervisor in my job before I retired, and you always, congratulate in public and reprimand in private. So, you don't do anybody any good by calling somebody else out in front of
Calling them
their
out.
peers. Yeah.
Exactly. In front of peers and at a full board meeting. Exactly. I agree with that. That's a great line. You're going to have to email me that, Steve. Email me that, will you? So I
will. Sure.
Right. So I can use it. I'll pretend it's mine.
You can have it.
I'll
I don't know where it
pretend
came. I don't know where it came from. It wasn't mine either.
Okay. then you don't have dibs on it. So we can both use it then. I have, you guys, some of you may know, I have a whole another webinar called Toward Better Board Recruitment. And I have a theory about this thing, absenteeism, and sometimes how it happens is because I don't believe we set clear enough expectations at the point when we're recruiting for prospective board members. But lucky for you, we don't have time for me to launch down that avenue. So we're ready really to wrap up, but I do want to share a couple of more things with you and then get your thoughts about the book and how you might use the book and the ideas from it. I wanted to share this letter. You can see the address there, which it's on the slide. Oh, and hey, Sam will tell you how you acquire these slides. We will make sure we hook you up with a copy of these slides. This one shows you the address to a blog by Jamie LaRue. He is very famous in library land. He has been very famous for a very long time. And this is a letter that he wrote to a patron who had some really serious concerns with the book. And at the time this happened, Jamie LaRue was the director of a library in Colorado. He has been very active in ALA. He is the former director of the Office of Intellectual Freedom at ALA. He now does consulting and keynote presentations all over the place. He was at the ILA conference not long ago. It's a long letter. I think you'll find the entire thing on his blog, but it's one of the best responses that I've ever found that incorporates both of these concepts from the book, mutual purpose and mutual respect. Let me read to you just a little bit from this letter. And this is a quote. As noted in our policies, you do have the right to appeal my decision to the Board of Trustees. And if you'd like to do that, let me know. I can schedule a meeting. Meanwhile, I'm more than happy to discuss this further with you. Here comes the mutual purpose. Wait till you hear this. I do appreciate many things about you. Your obvious value of reading, your loving relationship with your child, your willingness to raise issues of importance to you in the public square. Thank you very much for taking time to raise your concerns with me. And although I suspect you might not agree with my position, I hope it's clear that I have given it a great deal of thought, and I believe it is in accordance with our guiding principles and those, by the way, the guiding principles of the founders of our nation, because this patron had kept referring to the founding fathers. And he ends, best wishes to you and your family. It's a lovely letter. It's one of the best responses I've ever read. So take a look at that when you have the time. And to close out here, much of what we've talked about in Crucial Conversations has been somewhat reactive, positive reinforcement and good outcomes, but somewhat reactive. This is something I wanted to let you know about. This is a program from the American Library Association and Libraries Transform. It's very proactive because this program encourages libraries to be the place, to take center stage, to be the convener of community conversations of local interest or conversations of state, regional, and national interest for that matter. You can see there the website where you can find more about how to learn to lead or facilitate these kinds of community conversations. There's even a free workbook readily available on their website. And Becky, I want to ask you this because I think, wasn't there a time when there were grants from ALA for libraries to take this on? Is that true or false?
There wasn't a lot of Iowa libraries got those grants. ALA gave out $2 million worth of money in $5,000 chunks to a library that wanted, maybe it was $3,000, that wanted to do a community conversation. And they asked that the library find an issue that was a local concern.
Okay.
And then work through this course that they put together, and then use the information that they got to hold those community conversations. Some of the Iowa libraries did some really, really cool things. I would be curious to know if there's anybody on in the webinar today who got one of those grants and what you used it for. John.
We got a grant that I just filed the final report today. We wanted, my perspective was one of trying to meet with the community and talk about our Carnegie Library and the fact that it's give or take 3,200 square feet on 2 floors, not handicapped accessible, and not big enough to serve the community in the way that I think a library should today. We ended up with the first discussion having 2 people from the public and 3 trustees. Out of a community of 1,900, that's not a very good representation. Second attempt was a Zoom meeting at a trustee meeting. We ended up having 3 more different people in attendance, but that still didn't make very well. And our October deadline for having everything done basically was upon us, and in my mind, we didn't have anything. I requested an extension, and that extension basically put it through till June, where I have to file the final report. But we held another meeting in May, ended up with a total of 13 people in attendance. 5 of them were trustees, so we had a public meeting. And we got some ideas as to what needs in the community were, what the library could perhaps do to help meet those needs. And the end result, from my standpoint, didn't spend all of the money. Hopefully I won't have to pay it all back. I can continue to try to use it towards community facilitation. But we got some ideas. We've got some things that we need to talk about for the library's strategic plan and going forward. The book is an excellent resource on how to facilitate conversations, what to include, what not to include. Recognize as a facilitator, you should not be directing all of the conversation. You should be allowing the people to do that. And you as a facilitator, just kind of keeping people on track. That's not necessarily my forte, but I think the meeting went well. I think it worked. I didn't follow the book as much as I should have, perhaps. And that's probably because I've had 50 some years of public speaking and out in front of people, so felt comfortable leading. But the book is an excellent resource. It has materials to help develop the plan, a timeline to follow, suggestions on what to do. I would highly recommend it. And yes, I did apply for the grant the second go round and managed to get it. $3,000, I think it was well spent, although I didn't spend it all.
Well, very good. But it gave you, thanks for sharing your experience, and it gave you some good feedback for your long range plan. I like that as an outcome. Just at our ILOC conference just this past January, we had a session on some Iowa libraries that have received those same grants for community conversations from Libraries Transform. And so if you're interested in this and you want to learn a bit more about it, and you think this is something that would make really swell community programming at your library, you can circle back to our continuing education YouTube channel and listen to that recording. I have one more resource to share with you before we reveal the next book we're going to take up in the next Boardroom episode. And this is my last idea for how you might follow up tonight's conversation with another angle for board education. This assessment comes from Crucial Learning, which is connected to Crucial Conversation. So this is a website. And this particular assessment helps to gauge how you as an individual might approach tough topics that need to be talked about. If it's a problem of some kind, if it's an impasse that needs to be resolved, does your own behavior set you up for conversational success or not? So it's about a 30 question assessment, and it's freely found on the website. You can print to paper. And if you wanted to follow up from tonight and use this assessment at a future board meeting, that could be big fun, don't you think? Although Jay makes fun of what I think of as big fun. But you could also consider it board education. I think that Sam would agree to that.
We would.
We do.
Stacy Campbell from Alta Vista had a great point about going back to community conversation.
Yeah,
and she got the grant. If Stacy, if you want your mic, I'll speak for you real quick. But if you want to follow up, the community conversation led to a handicap accessible front door for the library.
Wow.
And so then ALA used this as an example for their next round of grant. And today she's going to get to present. Today she learned that she's going to get to present all that at the American Rural and Small Library Association meeting. Association of Rural and Small Libraries. Sorry.
Get
Becky's
out.
going, oh God, don't screw that up.
Get
but that's
out.
wonderful news, Stacy. That's great.
That
Fantastic.
is good for you, Stacy. That's impressive. I'm glad for that story. I do want to find out if there are other comments or observations about the book, and I will do that in a second. But I first want to reveal the next book that we're all going to discuss first in Big Ideas book discussions. That's daytime programming, I know, so not easy for trustees to attend those discussions. But we're going to bring the book back to the boardroom in August, and this is the book we're going to take up in August. Making Numbers Count by Chip Heath. When I saw this in browsing for new titles, I knew right away I wanted to use this. For one reason, we've used books by this author before. Chip and Dan Heath are brothers, and they often write together, although they didn't write this one together, but they often write together. And the other book we've used from them was the title, The Power of Moments. This is really, really new. It came out in January of this year. So I think this will have a lot to tell us about how we keep statistics and some great application to our life in libraries with ideas for how we can make better use of the data we collect to tell a better story about why that data matters. And so we don't have a specific date, but we know it will be August. We hope you'll come back again. And with that, I will ask if you have any more thoughts, comments, observations about the book, Crucial Conversations. Might you want to read this at your own board meeting and maybe have a book discussion about it? That counts for continuing ed, doesn't it, Sam? Does it, Sam?
I was answering
Does
Laura
it,
in the
Sam?
chat. Yes, you
Yes.
may. I would absolutely love to see in your board minutes how you discuss any of these books in your board minutes.
Yeah, I think the chat has been flying past me, so catch me up. with what people are saying.
Sorry, I'm typing.
I had to share real quick today. We had in our group, we had, if you want to talk about trustee and absenteeism, this was trustee, they need to have a crucial conversation about the trustees not addressing the business of being trustees, and that they said every library meeting should take 20 minutes.
Ooh.
And the whole room kind of was shocked that was just you know, you want to have a quick meeting, but setting up ahead of time and saying, nope, you only get 20 minutes from us, is not, you know, meeting the obligations of trustees. And then from that same group I had, they asked me, one board asked if they could do all their business meeting for the board via email, which you can't, I mean, you can't do it all via email. That's against the rules. just FYI, in case you're wondering.
FYI, it's against the rules. Oh my goodness. It would be hard to get through a business agenda in 20 minutes, I suspect.
Oh, our board's even better than I thought.
You guys are
hearing
all
hearing some of these other comments.
Exactly, Steve. You guys are all so highly functioning. None of these examples apply to you.
This is not to say that you can't have a 20-minute meeting. That is fine. I mean, but don't set the expectation that after 20 minutes are up, you are out the door. That is the problem.
or that every one of them will go that
Every
fast.
one of them will be that way. There will be a few fast meetings. That is fine.
Bon, I will come in real quick.
Yes.
Sam had actually asked a question about whose job is it to deal with the absentee trustees. And I sort of jumped in and answered that, but make sure that I'm on the right track here and agree with me, please.
Okay.
In my opinion, it is the board chair who is to ensure that the meetings run properly and in conjunction with the mayor and council who appoint the board members. It would be lovely to say the director should be completely out of it, because I know that usually doesn't happen that way. The director has to take on some of that, but in my opinion, I think the best outcome of that would be board chair as well as the mayor and council.
I agree with you.
Whew,
Becky, I do. And I also think you brought up a good point about other people who could be in on that conversation eventually. And I think it is important for the mayor to be made aware of absenteeism, because they're the ones who appoint people to the board. So I think that's totally legit. Maybe that conversation could happen first between the board president and the absentee person, and then see where it goes from there. But certainly make the mayor aware of it. I think that's a great point. So if any of you said in chat that you're thinking about picking up the book, Crucial Conversations, sharing it, or tonight's commentary and the slides from tonight with your board at a future meeting, might this become a local discussion for you? I always love to hear that if that happens ever.
The book is full of so many examples of this book helping people have conversations. It's kind of the inspiration about it too. So
yeah. Well, with that, we are very nearly out of time. So I want to thank all of you for spending your evening this way and for contributing yourselves to, I hope you found, was a good conversation tonight in this boardroom webinar. My thanks to Becky and Jay and Samantha for being here too and helping with the technical side of things. And I hope you'll come back again in August when we talk about making numbers count. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks so much.